but I can't see where it shows.
Here we are. I think I play. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I can see some participants joining us now. Apologies for the delay, everybody. We all had a technical difficulty this morning, well, this afternoon actually, trying to start this Zoom call, but we're on now and that's what's important. So thank you for joining. Today it will be myself, Saray Turk, Managing Partner at Legal Circle, Cyril Nathar, Partner at Legal Circle and Head of KSA Practice. And of course, then there's lovely Tamara, who is joining us on the call to make sure that hopefully we have no more technical issues today. So welcome for those who are joining us as we speak. What we'd like today is to make it an interactive discussion. So what we're going to do is ask the audience some questions. I'll ask those aloud. And if you can respond in the chat box, that would be fantastic. So it's just a way to make this a little bit more interactive. And so we learn a little bit more about the audience rather than have them listening only to us. So the first question to the audience before we start in just a few minutes, as I see more participants are joining, is if you can tell us where you are logging in from. So are you from Saudi, are you from Dubai, or are you from an overseas jurisdiction? So if you just enter that into the chat box while we're waiting, that would be fantastic. Okay, great. So I can see some responses coming through there. All right, so I see that we're already gone over time. Thank you for those who are responding and letting us know where you're from. That's fantastic. I can see lots of people are from Dubai, which is good. My next question to you is therefore, what stage are you at? Are you just curious about setting up in Saudi Arabia? If you are curious, you can type C. And if you are serious about setting up in Saudi, you can type in S. That would be fantastic. So you can do that as I'm speaking. All right. So, so today, again, I have with us, Tamara, if you can change the slide, Cyril Nathar, and we will be looking and concentrating today on how you can set up in KSA. So again, just a quick intro about Cyril. He's a partner of the Saudi practice at Legal Circle. He has had over 20 plus years of experience, worked across the Middle East in both litigious and non-litigious matters, and advised clients across healthcare, media, IT, telecommunications, energy and construction, and he was a former DLA Piper lawyer and BSA. So for those who don't know, it's bin Shabib, an associate law firm in UAE.
Formerly, yes.
And Cyril is also the founder of The Edge, which is a legal tech platform that automates legal document generation, both in Arabic and English. So thanks very much for joining us today, Cyril. Tamara, next slide.
Well, thank you, Soraya. Thank you for the introduction. It gives me great pleasure in joining this webinar and having the opportunity to speak about this critical subject, which is the foreign investment legal and regulatory environment in Saudi, and the ways in which foreign investors might access this big market. So just to give a bit of background about the legislative framework, it is worth noting that the first foreign investment law was enacted way ago on the 10th of April 2000 by virtue of Royal Decree number M1. Then the pace of legislative reforms accelerated following the accession by Saudi Arabia to the WTO, the World Trade Organization. It's also worth noting that Saudi made several commitments at the WTO to open several sectors to foreign investments, most notably back then franchising and telecommunications, but not solely. Other sectors also were concerned. So, what is the foreign investment law and the implementing regulations that were issued shortly afterwards concerned with? They are aimed at regulating the way in which foreign businesses and foreign investors can enter and set up a presence in Saudi Arabia and do business in Saudi Arabia, there are many sectors that are open to foreign investment under the law. Services, in industrial activities, contracting activities, but also trading activities with some recent interesting developments in the trading sector. How a foreign investor can access the Saudi market? There are several ways which we will consider shortly. They can set up on their own, have a Saudi partner. Sometimes this is mandatory, sometimes this is optional. They can also have a majority stake in with a Saudi partner in a company, or they can establish on their own, whether a limited liability company, a joint stock company, a branch, or a TSO, a technical scientific office, and we will consider these options at greater length shortly. It is very important to note that some activities remain off limits to foreign investments. These relate mainly to security types of activities, production of ammunitions, explosives, oil drilling, oil exploration, real estate brokerage, and other activities. But it is important to note that these this so-called negative list, which was previously issued by the Saudi Supreme Economic Council, which has now been cancelled, no longer existed, has been replaced by another authority, is reviewed constantly. It's important to note that this list has significantly shrunk, and there are just a few activities that are prohibited to foreign investors. Some activities have been recently opened, such as land transportation, metro and bus, but within certain conditions, but also employment recruitment agency and audiovisual activities. So these were the main activities that were removed from this famous negative list. And this is another way for the Saudi government to show their willingness to encourage foreign investors to come and set up in Saudi and undertake as many business activities as they want.
Excellent. So Cyril, just on that point, I mean, you've obviously talked now a little bit about in terms of the activities that are, on a negative list, on a positive list, and how they've expanded and then, again, shrunk. Can we look at the type of or the forms of companies that can be set up in Saudi? So I know there's been some changes. I know there are different requirements. So let's just explore. The audience is sitting here. They want to hear about how they can set up in Saudi. Sure. They can set up a business. Obviously, there will be different forms that are available to them that will be beneficial. So let's just have a look at that, I guess, starting with the LLC.
Yes, but before considering the various options, it's important to just make a general remark. Foreign investors can do a business with Saudi and in Saudi. With Saudi, we will talk about it later. In Saudi, so that they might choose to establish a presence. There are many options available to them. The most common being the LLC, the limited liability company. I know that our friends from Dubai and the Emirates are familiar with this type of companies as well, because they exist in the UAE. So what are the main features of this company? It can have a minimum of one shareholder and the maximum of 50. When it reaches 50 shareholders, they will have to convert it into a joint stock company. We'll see what is a joint stock company. The liability of shareholders, it's a very well-known principle, is limited to their contributions to the capital of the company. Of course, third parties can pierce the corporate veil in certain circumstances. The managers, well, the LLC can be managed by a sole shareholder or a board of sole manager, or a board of managers. And in this latter case, the powers of the managers will be determined in the Articles of Association or in a separate instrument. And there is also a provision in the Saudi companies law providing that whenever the number of shareholders is over 20, they may appoint a supervisory board to oversee the management of the company. There is no minimum capital requirement except for certain activities, as we will see later in the presentation. For certain activities, for example, if you choose to undertake a trading activity and to establish a company that will engage in trading activities, and you decide to have a Saudi partner, the minimum capital will be 30 million. And if you decide to go on your own and also undertake commercial activities, the minimum capital will be 200 million Saudi riyals, but paid over a 5 years period. There's no public subscription, so yes. Yes,
sorry, I
Soraya.
just wanted to stop you there. So whilst we're discussing the LLC, what I thought I might do is just ask the audience if they were in any specific activity, because that way we could then speak to them or let them know maybe what capital requirement is available or is required if they're in a certain activity. So if you're listening to this webinar, and if you're in a specific activity and want to know if there's a minimum capital requirement, please just type in what activity you're involved in or thinking or curious about setting up in, and then we can pick that up as Cyril is speaking and come back to you. So I can see, Cyril, already we have people in the online social media services. Will that be, if they were to set up an LLC, would that be something that there'd be a minimum capital requirement for?
To my knowledge, there would be no minimum capital. But having said that, typically when a company, especially LLC, is established, people or MISA, the Ministry of Investment, Saudi Ministry of Investment, requires at least 100,000 Saudi riyal. You cannot imagine a company without having a minimum capital set. So they would probably have to consider injecting 100,000 Saudi riyals, but it's important to note that this is only for incorporation purposes. Once the incorporation is complete, they can recover the capital that was, contributed
So it's not actually locked in. It doesn't in. Once they've set it up, they're able to remove it.
Yes, but typically investors contribute between 100,000, 500,000 just to give some weight to the corporate entity and encourage, if I can say so, the regulator to approve the foreign investment license.
Excellent, great. I can see trading and services and consultants as well. So again, so based on what you're just saying, very generally, that there would be a capital requirement. You're thinking it's about 100,000, but that's not locked in. Once after they've incorporated, they can use that for capital.
Yes.
Dina.
Generally, it's not set in stone, but when the incorporation formalities are initiated, they will be told by the regulator MISA that they need to inject some funds, some amount, 100,000, varying from between 100,000 and 500,000, just to give some weight to the. Yes.
Great. So let's have a look at the pros and cons. Let's have a look at the pros and cons of an LLC. So obviously there are different forms available to people that want to set up. So we're still on an LLC. Maybe you can just run us through the pros and cons.
Sure. Among the benefits that an LLC can give is that it can engage in the full range of activities licensed to it by the Ministry of Investment. Here, it's important to say that Saudi has adopted an international classification of industrial activities, and we will talk about it later briefly. So it is among the activities mentioned in this list that the foreign investor will have to pick up the activities that will be mentioned in the activities and the objects of the company in the articles of association. If it chooses to engage in industrial activities, it can apply for and obtain a loan from the SIDF, which is the Saudi Industrial Development Fund. It can also sponsor its foreign employees, and it has a pretty straightforward governance model, making it a light and flexible corporate vehicle. As I told you, it's managed by one manager, may be managed by several board managers whenever it has, significant volume of activities. So it's a quite flexible vehicle, and one that is the most commonly used by foreign investors, because JSC is a much heavier beast to manage. And that it can be incorporated relatively quickly. Typically it would take 2 to 3 months. Now with the pandemic, people have to anticipate a bit longer time frame to complete the incorporation process. It can be undertake the activities that were licensed to it whenever they have defined the activities of the company. For example, in the industrial field, they have selected the activities from the International Classification of Industrial List. They will not be allowed to undertake activities that are not under foreign investment license. So we would strongly recommend that foreign investors, whenever choosing the LLC, clearly define the objects clause of the articles of association, so to make sure that they can undertake the full range of activities that they want to pursue in the kingdom. One major problem, and I have faced it, in my practical experience as a lawyer in Saudi, is that the liquidation of the LLC can be quite complex and will be, its successful outcome will rely heavily on the cooperation of the partner if the foreign investor chooses to have a Saudi partner. So this is also an important consideration to bear in mind whenever you establish an LLC. If you consider having a Saudi partner, you will have also to consider the difficulties that go with the liquidation if the company goes into trouble down the road.
Cyril, I just had a question to ask you on this point about LLC. So we're talking about foreign investors, but let's say you have a GCC national. Is he still considered to be
no.
foreign, and do the rules apply to him or her?
No. They will, yes. They will receive equal treatment. Under the GCC agreement, they will receive equal treatment. So they won't have to go, GCC investors, for example, Emirati investors, won't have to go through MISA to obtain a foreign investment license. They will directly go to the Ministry of Commerce and establish a company like any Saudi citizen or Saudi entity. And the process will be, very, very straightforward, and it will take between 3 to 4 weeks to complete, easier than going through MISA.
Okay, so there's a completely different sort of avenue of process
yes,
for
exactly.
GCC nationals. Great.
Yes.
So Mohammed,
are considered are treated like Saudi citizens.
Yeah, sure. Because we got a question in the chat box relating to GCC nationals. So I hope I've understood it correctly. But that person asked whether GCC nationals have the same role. So based on what you're telling me at the moment, it's not the same as being a foreign investor, which is somebody, say, as an expat from Europe or the UK or anywhere else other than GCC.
They will receive equal treatment, and the colleague from Dubai will understand what I'm saying in Arabic. It's called mu'amala bil mithl, so it's equal treatment, and they will be treated as Saudis.
Excellent, fantastic. All right, thanks a lot.
We move to the second.
So if we can talk about
the second type of
companies as being another form of a company that is available,
which is the joint stock company. It's it's aligned on the Société Anonyme, the French company called Société Anonyme. So for those who are familiar with French law, they know what I'm talking about. So the joint stock company is a much bigger corporate vehicle. There is a board of directors, and There's a chairman, there's a CEO, and there are many corporate bodies involved in the management. And something that is worth noting is that only GSCs, joint stock companies, can undertake certain types of activities like banking, financing, and insurance activities. There are actually two types of joint stock companies: private JSCs, which are very much in use among family-owned businesses. I worked with a group in Jeddah, and they had their the holding companies was a private joint stock company. Why do they choose a private joint stock company? Just to prepare to take it for an IPO in the future. It will become, once it's listed, it will become a public joint stock company. So public joint stock companies were previous private joint stock companies. They have reached a certain level of maturity, making them ripe for an IPO. They will be listed on the on Tadawul, which is the Saudi Stock Exchange. They will be regulated by the Capital Markets Authority, the CMA, and they will become listed companies subject to regulations issued by CMA, and also corporate governance codes and guidelines issued by the Capital Markets Authority. It's also important to note that the JSCs will be created by virtue of a resolution of the Ministry of Commerce, and the one that will be listed will also be subject to the issuance of a royal decree. Okay, so this was a kind of overview of the joint stock companies. Can we move to the next slide? Yes. Some of the key features of the JSC here, there's a capital, a minimum capital requirement of Saudi Riyal 500,000, except for certain companies, for example, companies that are subject to the regulations of the CMA, or also the Saudi Central Bank, SAMA, will have greater capital requirements. For example, for Saudi, for insurance and reinsurance companies, the capital requirements are higher than this one. The JSCs will be permitted to buy back or pledge their shares. It's also important to note that shareholders do not enjoy statutory preemption rights on the transfer of shares, so these will have to be provided for in shareholders' agreements. It's important to note that shareholders' agreement may be entered between shareholders for both LLCs and joint stock companies. The JSCs also will be permitted to issue sukuks, which are bonds, and other debt instruments that can be converted into negotiable shares. There are also some rules governing conflicts of interest in joint stock companies. For example, a member of the board of directors may not vote at the board or shareholder meetings in respect of transactions in which they may have an interest. And a contract that has been entered between a member of the board in breach of these conflict of interest rules can be voided, and the director may have to return any proceeds he has received under the contract.
Excellent. So I think what we might do is just jump to the branch of a foreign company, because I feel that that's probably...
Yes, the pros and cons are a bit similar to those you will encounter in LLCs. So now we move to the
but also, I guess that I think most of the audience, or just generally from what our discussions are with people, is that a lot of them want to set up a branch of a foreign company. But in recent developments, and in light of actually those recent developments, there's been a lot of propaganda around Saudi saying, by 2023, headquarters must be in Saudi. People need to be moving there. So how does this all fit in? Like, how does a branch of a foreign company, is that still okay? Or is that now the parent company needs to be sitting in Saudi and therefore this is going to change? What implications?
Yes. I mean, for the announcement that was made, and you are referring to it, it's very important announcement that companies that wish to obtain a governmental contract and take part in public procurement tenders will have to have their head offices located in Saudi. So that I believe this is a very smart move from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to attract international companies and have them move their head offices from let's say Dubai or Bahrain and have them relocate to Riyadh, for example. Now, just getting back to a branch, the branch is not does not have an independent and separate personality from that of the mother company. While it is much easier to incorporate than an LLC, because the LLC will have to have its articles of association approved by MISA, and it's a time-consuming process. Here, you won't have to have the articles. There are no articles in the first place because it's an extension of the branch is an extension of the foreign company. But there's, the major inconvenience of the branch is that any liabilities incurred by the branch will be a direct liability to the mother company, whether it is financial or legal liability. For example, lawsuit, any amount of money, any award, financial monetary award that will be granted to a third party against the branch will be, against the mother company, not the branch, because the branch does not have a legal personality. Notwithstanding this, the branch can sponsor its employees. It can undertake the full range of activities licensed to it, which will typically be the activities of the mother company. It can engage in projects in both the private and public sectors across the whole of the kingdom. Its activities will not be limited to a region or province, but it will be able to undertake its activities across the whole kingdom. As I said, it can sponsor its employees. Like also I mentioned before, the incorporation process is relatively simple because there are no articles of association involved. They won't have to get them approved. They are not allowed to engage in marketing and promotional and trading activities. This is a very important point also to take into account. It is also.
Do you mind just clarifying that? Because on the one hand, we're saying that it can do what the parent company can do, and it can, have visas and.
The activities that are licensed. The activities that are licensed. So whenever they come to apply for a license, they will be told that, okay, we will give you the foreign investment license, but you may not engage in trading, promotional or marketing activities. So you see. They can undertake the whole activities that are mentioned within the license, but not beyond the scope of what has been licensed to them by MISA.
But they can't market or promote or trade in that license?
No. So the last important thing to note is that sometimes the incorporation of a branch can take time if the branch manager is a foreign citizen and has no residency permit, so you will have to obtain a visa for him before the incorporation can be completed. But all in all, the incorporation process of a branch is far more straightforward than that of a limited liability company or a joint stock company.
Excellent. So we'll move on.
Yes.
So scientific office. Sorry, this is quite interesting because most of the panelists are from Dubai, and we know we've got representative offices. We don't have a technical and scientific office. So is this similar? Is it different? What is the practical implication of this? Well,
the answer will be quite confusing and misleading because it's a bit similar, but it's also a bit different. It's similar in that it will act as a representative office, but it will be acting as a typically the technical and scientific office was used for pharmaceutical companies wanting to establish a presence in Saudi, but did have an agent or distributor, a Saudi agent or distributor, just as a liaison office between the distributor or the agent and the foreign pharmaceutical company. Now, industrial companies, also technological companies are licensed, are being able to get licenses to establish a technical and scientific office. So what are the activities that this TSO can undertake? They can undertake promotional marketing activities for the activities of the mother company in Saudi. They will act as a liaison for between the distributor and or the agent and the mother company. They will also prepare market studies, which they will share with either the agent or distributor or the mother company for it to be aware of how the market is developing, what are the major trends. And most importantly, it will be able to promote and market the activities, products, and services of the mother company. The incorporation formalities and procedures for the TSO are similar to that of the branch, and it would take typically between 1 month and a half, 2 months for the incorporation process to complete.
Excellent. I think we can.
Other than the TSO, for those who might be interested in setting up a TSO to test, the Saudi market before considering establishing a full-fledged commercial and operational presence.
Well, so you did say that it was mostly related to pharmaceutical companies, but
yes.
But technically others could also?
Originally, it was used mostly by pharmaceutical companies, but now we are seeing more and more industrial companies, IT companies also setting up TSOs in Saudi. So it's no longer limited to pharmaceutical companies, but it's going beyond this very limited scope of activities. And as I told you, we have seen major industrial conglomerates, but also companies setting up TSOs lately in Saudi.
Okay, fantastic. I guess if there's anybody who is interested to know more about TSOs, or to inquire about whether it relates to what industry they're in, you just put in chat box what industry you're in and any questions you have. We can get back to that before the end of this session as well. But Cyril, I guess tell us a little bit more about the pros and cons then of a TSO. I mean, you spoke a little bit about it, but perhaps just to summarize.
As far as the advantages are concerned, there is no minimum capital requirement. As I told you, the incorporation formalities are simpler than that of a company, similar to that of a branch. And the TSO has full control over employees, which it can sponsor. It's important to note here that now the TSO can employ up to 50 persons in Saudi. It was, I think the number was about 15 a few years back. Now the number has increased to 50. Now the disadvantages of the TSO are that it cannot be a profit center. It must act as a liaison office for the local agent or distributor. It does not have a separate legal personality, and here it has a similar feature, a common feature with the branch. And its incorporation is often conditional upon the furnishing by the local agent or distributor of a letter of support. And here it's a bit problematic if there is a problem between the mother company and the local agent. The local agent might not be very cooperative and might not want to provide such a letter of support. And as there's a limitation on the number of employees it can have. So right now the number is set as at 50, but who knows, maybe in the future it can employ more than 50 persons.
Fair enough. Thanks very much. I think we can move to the next slide now. What I think is important to clarify to the audience in particular is that, if they were to set up prior to 2020, they would be dealing with a different authority. And today we know that there's been so many changes in Saudi Arabia to make it more attractive for foreign investors. And so they've changed how their licensing authority operates and what they do within that. So tell us a little bit historically about how, where you used to go to set up and now where you would go, and what they're doing to make it a more seamless experience for.
Yes. I mean, the process has always been centralized. So before SAJA, the Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority, was converted into a ministry, SAJA was also operating as a one-stop shop. So under the roof of SAJA, and now it's the same with the Ministry of Investment, and the conversion took place in February 2020. It's acting as a one-stop shop for all foreign investors. So under the roof of the Ministry of Investment, as was the case with SAJA before, you will find all the ministries, public agencies and departments with which foreign investors will most likely interact. So you will find a branch of the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Interior for Immigration and Visas, the General Organization for Social Insurance to register your employees with this very important department. You will find also the General Authority of Zakat and Tax, the Saudi Tax Authority. You will also find the Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and a host of other departments with which the foreign investors will interact. So it acts as a one-stop shop. The foreign investor won't have to go to different ministries and departments, and this will avoid the hassle of going right and left to have the whole licensing process properly handled and finalized. Just to say here that the Ministry of Investment, like SAJA, consists of three major units. One is called the Investor Service Unit. Its major task is to ensure that the forms that are submitted and filed online by foreign investors, there's a platform just to let people know that the whole process is handled online on the website of the ministry. So the whole investment licensing application process is handled online. You will file your application online. The file will be studied by the service unit, and they will ensure that the forms are completed and that the documentation is handled properly, that there are no mistakes, any omissions or inaccuracies in the applications. Then yes,
sorry,
right.
I wanted to stop you at that point, because I know that we're saying that it can be done online, but how easy is it actually practically to do? So if you're sitting, say, in Paris, I can say somebody's from Paris or from Tunisia or from Dubai, and you wanted to go online and try and set up. I know they say it's quite easy, but
well, despite the many assurances that SAJA before and now MISA give to potential foreign investors that the process has been streamlined and that things are easy to complete, from my own practical experience, foreign investors find it very difficult to undertake the licensing process on their own from A to Z. So, I mean, in 99% of cases, they give up at some point handling the process themselves, and they ask a lawyer or someone who has practical experience filing the applications online to help them with the process, because it's document driven, so they need to understand the process very well. And I mean, lawyers who have experience in handling the application, the licensing process are the ones who are in the best position to help them. So
Okay.
I would recommend that they ask a lawyer to help them along the way from the inception to the completion of the process, because it's, as I said, document driven. They will have to interact very often with the officers from the ministry in case they have to resubmit the applications if there is any inconsistency, inaccuracy, or mistake in the application.
So in that sense, it's really a little bit like Dubai, where you can actually set up, but practically, once you've got the process, once you start the process, there is a lot of nuances that make it difficult. And if you've not sort of done it many times before and understand the processes and procedures, you're more likely not to need some help to navigate that process.
Exactly. And some of the formalities, like, for example, opening a bank account, and also getting the articles of association of the company notarized will require a physical presence, because you will have to go to the notary public office within the ministry and have the document notarized. So yes, there's an element of physical interaction involved in the process, and this can only be properly handled by a lawyer who is familiar with the process, with foreign investment formalities.
Perfect. All right. So I think we can move on to the next slide, where we talk.
Yes, sure.
Talk about
yes,
on licensing. Yes. So let's.
Well, there are several types of restrictions. Some are concerned with the requirement of that a Saudi partner participate with the foreign investor. So the foreign investor will not be able to set up a presence without a Saudi partner. So, for example, for commercial activities, there are two options here. I have to be clear about this. The foreign investor may set up a company to undertake commercial activities with a Saudi partner and without a Saudi partner. With a Saudi partner, then they will have to give this partner a minimum of 25% of the shares of the company, and here the minimum capital requirement will apply, which is 30 million Saudi riyals. So if they want to have a Saudi local partner because they deem it important, because the Saudi partner has the resources, the connections, can get them important, meaningful government contracts, they will have to have a minimum capital requirement of 30 million, and the Saudi partner who will own a minimum 25% of the company's share capital.
Just a question at this point.
Yes, if they want to go on their own, if they want to go on their own and undertake commercial activities, as I mentioned before, the minimum capital requirement will be 200 million invested over a 5 years period, and there will be some requirements. They will have to set up for technology companies. They will have to establish a research and development facility to train a minimum number of Saudi citizens, etc.
And Cyril, with this, in terms of the commercial activity, does this relate to an LLC company or any form of company?
It can be any form of company. It can be an LLC or a joint stock company.
Okay, but if it was a branch, for example, of an entity, it was a commercial, then not necessary.
It cannot undertake commercial activities in the first place, so they will have to incorporate it either as an LLC or a joint stock company. So the other restrictions include the telecommunications sector, where a minimum Saudi participation of 40% is required. If you want to establish a company that will engage in telecommunications value-added services such as SMS, MMS, other interactive services, the minimum Saudi participation will be 30%. Insurance and reinsurance, a minimum of 40% of Saudi participation. Property financing, minimum 40%. management of construction projects, detailed engineering design and EPC, engineering procurement consulting contracts, 25%. Public transport, here bus transportation within cities, 30%. Metro transportation within cities, minimum Saudi participation of 20%. So the consortia, the 4 consortia that were involved in the building of the Riyadh Metro probably had 20% of Saudi participation in their capital. Okay, so now there are some restrictions and obligations on foreign investors relating to the nature of the activities involved. For IT activities, they are not allowed to open shops. For trading licenses, when the foreign investors chooses to go on 100% model, he will have to train 15% of Saudis, and they will not be able to open more than 1 shop per district. For industrial licenses, they will not be allowed to open shopping centers for products without obtaining the ministry's approval. For contracting activities, they will not be allowed to carry out any consultancy and design activities. Holding companies will have to obtain the prior approval of the ministry for investment for each project to be established and investment for each of the companies. Real estate license, they will have to obtain also the ministry's prior approval for investment on any property to be owned or invested, so that the cost of any project is not less than 30 million Saudi riyals in land and building, provided that the projects are not located within the boundaries of Mecca or Medina, which makes perfect sense from the Saudi perspective, because there are restrictions in these 2 holy cities. Okay, so as part of also of the rapidly changing legislative and regulatory framework, Saudi has embarked upon a train of legislative reforms. They have enacted quite spectacular number of laws and regulations, which are all aimed at making the legislative landscape far more friendly and attractive for foreign investment. We will just take a look at the most important laws that have been implemented. And we will also indicate here that regarding some of these laws, we have written some articles. So if you would like us, we will indicate when we mention the relevant law that we have contributed an article to explain the provisions of the law. And if you are interested in obtaining a copy of the law, just let us know by email. So among the most important laws. Yes, Soraya.
Sorry, I was just about to jump in and say, yes, so we do have a bank of articles on all these different topics. So if you're interested in learning more about any of these particular ones, please just type into the chat box what you wish to receive more information about. So whether it's the revisions of the Saudi company law, the bankruptcy law, the ISIC, which I know that Cyril is going to cover as well today. So maybe just enter into the chat box what you'd like to receive more information on. Thanks very much.
And I will indicate, when I refer to a particular law, I will indicate that I have written an article, so they will know if they want to receive a copy. So among the most important laws that have been published recently, it's important to note that there have been significant revisions to the Saudi companies law, and lately a draft law was circulated for public consultation. It has not been promulgated yet. There are some important features regarding corporate governance of companies and also the introduction of key Anglo-Saxon legal concepts such as tag-along and drag-along that foreign investors would expect to find whenever they enter into shareholders agreements with, for example, their Saudi partners, if they choose to have a Saudi partner in the company. Also, it's important to note that the Saudi government has adopted the ISIC 4, which is the international standard industrial classification of activities. So whenever you will want to select the activities that most suit the activities of your mother company, you will have to rely heavily on this list and choose the activities from it. Also, a new Saudi bankruptcy law was enacted a few years back. It's very important to know that there was no such law before. So this law has incorporated the best international practice among its provisions. Also, a new professional companies law for engineers, for example, also lawyers, but there has been some controversy because the Ministry of Justice has not yet given its green light for foreign Saudi law for foreign law firms to establish, joint ventures and have them properly registered with the Ministry of Justice. There has been some controversy when Clifford Chance was registered. Some Saudi lawyers challenged this, and but this is a very important development for engineers, architects, other forms of consultancies that want to establish a presence in Saudi. And as we said previously, there have been some revisions to the negative list. Some activities were removed from it, such as road transport, real estate brokerage, audiovisual services, and recruitment and related services. Also very important to note that a new Saudi tender and procurement law has been promulgated, and also regulations, new cloud computing regulations, which makes Saudi an attractive destination for IT companies. It's important to note that very big companies have established a presence in Saudi following the promulgations of such law. I would mention Dow Chemicals, Pfizer, also Amazon, Apple. So I think that the enactment of these laws has played a major role in attracting those players. Let alone the fact that the Saudi citizens have a great appetite for new technologies. So this makes the Saudi market very attractive for companies that want to promote and market their products and services there.
Cyril, thanks so much for that. What I wanted to do now was, because I know that the focus of this discussion was about setting up in Saudi. Yes. But there may be some people, although they've not asked this question, it's just come to my mind, there might be some people that want to do business there, but not necessarily have a physical presence or be there. So, can you just explore and tell us a little bit more about how you can actually do business in Saudi and be, say, abroad, and then what relationships might govern that business transaction?
Yeah, of course. Apart from establishing presence, companies, foreign investors can do business by making direct sales from overseas into Saudi Arabia. They can also appoint a commercial agent, a distributor or a franchisee or a licensee in Saudi Arabia to distribute their products or services. In the case of a franchisee, the relationship will be now governed by the by the franchise law, which was enacted 2 years ago. And there's an article I wrote about the franchise law. So if someone is interested in this topic, they might ask for a copy of the article. Now, as far as agents, commercial agents and distributors are concerned, the most important law is the commercial agency law. They will have, the commercial agent will have to register the distribution or commercial agency contract with the Ministry of Commerce. There is a specific department called the Department of Commercial Agencies, where all agreements will have to be registered. And this is an important step for the Saudi agent to be protected against any counterfeited goods or unlawful competition. So these are the main options. You can appoint an agent, a distributor, or a franchisee, depending on your business, or you can make direct sales into Saudi without having a presence there.
Yeah, and I guess this really hasn't changed. So over the last few years, that was always an option available to to businesses. So that just remains, and I think now just with the legislative framework.
But the key change was the enactment of the franchise law, because before the promulgation of the franchise law, franchise agreements were also governed by the commercial agency law, which was quite awkward because the provisions of this law was not really tailored for the needs of the franchisor or the franchisee. So now they have best international practice law to govern the relationship. So this was a major development.
Right. Excellent.
It was also introduced to encourage international franchisers to establish a presence in Saudi and help recruit and employ Saudi youth, because there's a major unemployment problem in Saudi. So that was perceived as a way of mitigating this big problem.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that, Cyril, for clarifying that. So what I might do is just open the floor to questions, because we're almost about the end of the webinar. Tamara, if you just move along, I know that we're concluding, but just before we conclude, perhaps if there are any questions from the audience that you'd like to have clarified, whether that be, what is the appropriate form of a company that you should set up depending on your activity and business type, or whether any of the new laws particularly have specific implications to you, whether it is that you want to know more information about a specific things, please take the chance now to ask us your questions in the chat box, and Cyril and I can answer those for you. But as we're waiting for those questions to come through, Cyril, you can, if you'd like, just give us a summary and a wrap up of
what
Saudi Arabia is at today with the developments and what it's done to really attract foreign investors and what we can expect to see in the very near future.
Well, there have been many initiatives to attract foreign investors. For example, the fact that the Saudi government announced that if foreign companies wanted to participate in public procurement tenders, they would have to have their head office located in Riyadh. There are also some tax holidays that have been put in place. Also, foreign investors will be able to acquire real estate, but only for the purposes of conducting their activities in the kingdom. For industrial companies, they will be able to apply for and obtain loans from the SIDF, as I mentioned, up to 75% of their capital. So many things have been done to encourage foreign investors to come. It remains also to be seen whether there will be special laws and provisions for companies that intend to incorporate in smart cities like NEOM, whether there will be also more tax incentives that will be put in place. But generally, everything is being done to attract foreign investors, but also I have to say meaningful foreign businesses, because Saudi wants to attract not only foreign capital, but also want to attract foreign know-how and foreign technological skills, which are much needed in Saudi. Now, regarding the choice of companies, as I mentioned also, Soraya, this will be limited also by the type of activity. If the foreign investor considers establishing a company to undertake banking or insurance, they will only be able to set up a joint stock company, and this one will be regulated. Insurance and banking will be regulated by SAMA, which is the Saudi Arabian Monetary Agency, or in other terms, the Saudi Central Bank. So yes, there are some limitations depending on the nature of the activity that you wish to engage in Saudi.
Okay, excellent. So we don't have any questions coming through, but we can definitely, if any questions come to mind after the webinar, we can certainly answer those, and we will send the presentation to the audience, as well as those who have asked for specific articles. We'll definitely send that over to you. There's just a few things that I wanted to say before we wrap up today. We do have a legal broadcast group, which we post relevant and upcoming information on any laws both in Saudi and the UAE. So if you'd like to join that, please do send a message to the WhatsApp number that's on this last page. Also, if you've got any questions, or if you don't receive the slides and you need to follow up, please just email info@legalcircle.co as well. In terms of today, we can see that there is a number of people who are quite serious about setting up in Saudi. Other people were just curious to know a little more. So we're happy to set up a call with Cyril to go through any specific requirements from, whether that be form or capital requirements, or even just processes and procedures. Because as Cyril did say before, I mean, it is an online process technically and can be done abroad, but we know from experience that most people who have tried to set it up, it is quite difficult, because there will be questions that need to be clarified. You may need somebody on the ground to go and do some procedural things, particularly with notarizing documents and things like that as well. So, if you are going to be setting up there, it would be recommended to get some legal advice or support on the ground who can help to do that. So Cyril, I think if there are no further questions or I guess comments from you today, I believe we can wrap the webinar up and open the floor to any further questions, or they can reach out to us at a later stage. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we close for today?
No, I thought if someone might have a question for me, I'm more than happy to respond.
To answer. All right, perfect. No worries. Well, I think we've answered most of the ones that have come through as we were speaking. And of course, they're available to speak to us after this webinar. So without further ado, because I'm conscious of time, thank you very much for those who participated. And we can certainly and hope to see you at the next webinars. Please follow us on our LinkedIn, Instagram, and website, because we do have lots of upcoming webinars, both on this topic, in topics in the Saudi market, but of course then UAE and in particular in Dubai. So, for those Dubai audience, any requirements that you have in UAE, we can absolutely be supportive in that regard as well. So thanks very much. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you, Tamara. And we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks very much. Take care all. Thank you. Bye-bye.